one of the most disruptive technologies that we're facing currently in modern times. Disruptive, not necessarily taking a positive or negative stance, but definitely saying that it has the ability to drastically change a lot of different things, right? How we work, what work means, and specifically in the educational sphere, I think it is being discussed by people in the tech industry, people who frame educational policy in different parts of the world, about what it means to really introduce a technology that fundamentally could change what it means to learn. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and start my presentation. Here we go. It's called the Tech Takeover. Here, let me make it larger. The Tech Takeover of Education through AI in the classrooms. So I'm going to make it bigger. Okay, hold on. Let me get this out of the way. So yeah, the class summary is I want to briefly take a look at what are some of the projections for AI in the classrooms. As with many different aspects of AI, there's a lot of hype about what it could do, about some of the potential uses. I mean, we hear all the time about how AI is going to cure cancer and help us come up with a solution for climate change, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of that are projections. The same thing with AI personal tutors. There's been limited deployment about how these things are actually being used in classrooms. So as it is now, it's still kind of in the realm of possibility of projections. But I wanted to look at what some of the major players are saying about what they want to do. Then I want to introduce kind of perhaps the most widely discussed technology for AI in the classroom, which is the AI personal tutor. So I want to explain what that is. Microsoft is one of the many companies, big tech companies, who is in the process of developing these types of technologies and already starting to release them in certain areas. Um, and then also look at some causes for concern. I think that with any technology, my primary critique of technology, as you've probably heard in past classes that I've shared, is that we tend to embrace very widely, very quickly, any new technological development without really taking the time to think about it, to critique it, to consider what are some of the potential long-term effects of that. And I think that with any technology, whether it be a mechanical technology, a digital technology, I think it's extremely important to do that. And I take as my kind of point of reference that I've mentioned in many past classes, the Amish communities in different parts of North America, where the Amish community once a year comes together in kind of a community assembly and organizes a space for different community members to debate about which technologies they're going to accept and which technologies they don't. And most Amish communities tend to have very limited technologies. Most Amish communities in the United States, for example, don't use the motor vehicle. They have horse and buggies. But all of that decisions about what technologies to use and what not to use are based around a debate, a space of coming together and question. I think at the very least, that's something that everyone, every community, political community, physical community, educational community, I think we really need to be involved in kind of learn from the Amish in this aspect of how we really consider the pros and cons. So, based off of that reference, I wanted to raise what I think are four causes for concern, which you see here: epistemicide, education as interacting with one's surroundings or prompting a machine, the idea of what is happening inside our brain, following some neuroscience about how digitality is affecting how our brains are wired. And then kind of questioning whether technology, in a wider sense, I guess in a more philosophical lens, is an extension or a replacement of our human ability. And then lastly, kind of look at the underlying symbolic significance of this moment. Why is it that there seems to be such a widespread embrace of digitality, of digital tools, and specifically of artificial intelligence? And I want to take a look at why I think that might be, and maybe prompt us, using the word that comes from AI, prompt us to think about why it is we seem to be so open to adopting uncritically a lot of these AI technologies, including the AI personalized tutor in the classroom. Okay, so I always start with Ivan Illich, as most of you know. He's kind of my frame of reference for a lot of my thought, especially when it comes to technologies. He was a thinker who was very active in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, um, right as a lot of computer technology started to take off. It was obviously in the pre-internet age, but he was already beginning to see how systems thinking and word processors in the nascent age of computers was really beginning to change how we thought. Ivan Illich was a bookworm. He was a person very immersed in literary culture. And I think he understood that we were at the cusp of what he called a hinge moment in history, a moment when over 1,000 years of literary kind of scholarly thought was being challenged and slowly replaced by a different form of knowledge. And one of the things that he said is that one of the reasons humanity or modern day humans were so incapable of doing what the Amish do, that is, sitting down to question and debate, think about the pros and cons, the benefits and the drawbacks of any technological thing you're going to use, is because we have these modern certainties that are so deeply embedded into every aspect of our culture, of our epistemology, of our ontology, that they escape questioning, right? They're kind of the framework of how we think. So following from Illich on this idea of modern certainties that kind of create the frame of reference for our thought and for our debate. I think there are some modern certainties in the world of technology in the educational sphere. One of them is that computers aid in the educational journey. In most schools, in most ministries of education around the world, there will be very little debate around this point. They might talk about how many hours of computer time, what types of computer programs should be used versus what shouldn't be used, how to regulate how younger students use the internet. But nobody would question fundamentally that computers aid in the educational journey. That is a modern day certainty in the world of education. Secondly, and very similarly, access to modern digital technologies will always help children get ahead. It's kind of this idea of equating education with the idea of getting ahead in life, of preparing students for the job market, for the economy, what the economy is moving towards, and that digital technologies are absolutely necessary in this competitive race towards carving out your space in the job market. Another certainty is that closing the digital gap is necessary, especially for the future of youth in the developing world, and that technology is the future of the job market. So it is obviously beneficial for students to start using these technologies as early as possible. Um, I'm not necessarily saying that any of these certainties is fundamentally wrong or misguided. What I do think is important is that we open these certainties up for questioning and for debate, right? Is it true that closing the digital gap is necessary for a good future? In every case, in all cases, in every place. One of the reasons I'm very interested in questioning this is because in the country where I live, in El Salvador, and in many other places of the world, the next logical appendage to the modern certainty of technology's place in the world of education is the introduction of artificial intelligence into schools. I'm going to talk a little about in El Salvador. Our government is very I guess you could say digitally focused. We have Bitcoin. We had Bitcoin as one of our national currencies. The government is we recently passed. We're the first country in Latin America to pass a law regulating artificial intelligence, trying to attract Silicon Valley entrepreneurs. In the realm of education, last year our president invited Brian Romelli, who's kind of I guess you could say a tech bro, a leading figure in the world of artificial intelligence to a leading consulting role within the Ministry of Education. And so just in the last couple of years, there's been a huge focus on getting schools and tablets into the hands of every child. And with the new appointment of this AI expert into the realm of education, most people assume that El Salvador, like many other countries, is going to be kind of a guinea pig for the world for how we're going to introduce the AI personal tutor and other types of AI programs into the educational realm. One of the most potentially disruptive technologies of the educational sector, which is the AI personal tutor, combines two of the most unsettling technologies of the 21st century: the algorithmic tailoring of preferences of social media with the instant information retrieval of large language models. The AI personal tutor is basically like ChatGPT coupled with Facebook or Snapchat or Instagram, whatever your favorite social media profile might be. This idea when we're on Facebook, we're being constantly monitored by algorithms who are then feeding us more of what we supposedly like, which in turn limits the scope of what we interact with. There's been all of this criticism about how the algorithmic functioning of social media has been extremely damaging to the political realm, to individual people, to the process of thought. But at the same time, it's also very, very efficient at tailoring preferences to people. Obviously, ChatGPT and other large language models have the ability of very quickly synthesizing large amounts of information. And the AI personalized tutor is trying to combine these two technologies to personalize the educational journey for each and every child. Given the almost instantaneous adoption of large language models, for example, ChatGPT in, I think it was 2022, when it first came out to the public, received 100 million downloads in the first 3 months after it was released. Because of this almost instantaneous adoption of every new technology, it might seem rather futile to challenge the supposed advantages of this modern day certainty and to encourage reflection on the potential consequences of AI personal tutors on young people, communities, and the remaining vestiges of traditional vernacular and decolonial learning pathways. It might be already too late in terms of economic power. AI programs in the educational realm are expected to grow to over 20.8 billion in market growth by the year 2027. Obviously, where money is, power follows, and there's so much money being invested by Microsoft and ChatGPT and all of these major tech companies that are in cohorts with a lot of big states and governments, that it might be futile to think that we can actually question these things. However, I think that it's absolutely necessary. Like I mentioned, El Salvador, the country where I live, is one of the reasons I started thinking about this. Last year, our government announced via X or Twitter the hiring of this man you see in this picture named Brian Romelli, a leader in the AI industry and a self-proclaimed expert in what he calls the science of super prompting large language models. Okay, super prompting is essentially how to ask the right questions, how to correctly formulate, the questions that you type into ChatGPT. It's not just, it's the idea of not necessarily knowing something, but knowing how to ask a question of the machine in order to really kind of release a lot of the information that's available there. Romelli, like I said, he's a government advisor specifically tasked with proposing how to integrate AI technologies into business administration and into the public educational system. Given this focus of his previous work in the idea of super prompting, it seems very plausible to assume that the proposed direction of future educational reform in El Salvador, and I think that El Salvador is kind of a case in point for many other developing countries around the world, um, uh, is to expedite the process of providing children and young people with AI tutors, such as a personalized AI tutor or assistant, and instructing them in how to ask the right questions to this AI tutor, right? The idea that education is not necessarily about learning to read, learning to ask questions of people in your community, learning to discover, what's in your own mind and spirit and soul, but simply discovering the right questions to ask the machine. To ask, in this case, the AI personalized tutor. This focus of public education will shift from the tedious and laborious process of inciting in children a curiosity about the world to simply training children on how to correctly stimulate the neural learning networks of large language models and their AI iterations. Here's a few quotes from Romelli that when he was first announced as a advisor to the Ministry of Education here in my country. He said that in theory, a perfect AI platform should be able to accommodate any question posed just about any way and produce a great response. In many cases, this is what we see with new versions of large language models like ChatGPT. However, what is soon discovered is that simple questions produce simple answers. And maybe that is not enough. Soon the novelty of this type of AI wears off and you are left with something less exciting. Yet no matter how advanced ChatGPT and similar models become, the well-conceived prompt, the good question, will become the fundamental tool of the future. Education in the future is not about learning something, but rather learning how to ask the right questions of the machine. I have deemed this general category what he calls super prompts. A super prompt is more than a simple question generating simple answers. It is designed to elicit new emergent capabilities. That's interesting. It is designed to elicit new emergent capabilities. But of who? Of the student? Of the child? Of the person asking the question? No. With super prompts, we can explore the hidden layers of the AI model. We can help the large language model AI present what it knows, but what it did not know that it knew. Again, education, in Romelli's view, is not about trying to help children or young people discover, the new emergent capabilities inherent in themselves, but to help AI and other machine learning programs to learn what it doesn't know. I think it's kind of interesting if we want to take this quote and just kind of replace a few of the words in Romelli's final sentence with more, I guess you could say, human-centered concepts and for the recipients of our educational efforts. For example, this last part that's highlighted in yellow, we could say, with a renewed focus on education, we could help children explore the hidden layers of their thought. We can help young people present what their minds most want to know. Those are fundamentally contrarian and contrasting ideas of what education is, right? When education is focused about helping a machine unlock what it doesn't know, versus education in helping a young person discover what's inherent inside them, what they want to know, we're looking at fundamentally different ideas of what education it is. And I think it's very important to understand how dramatically different of a paradigmatic shift we're looking at here. This simple comparison lays bare the profundity of the shift in the purpose, intention, and function of education in the modern AI-dominated world. When society begins to frame the objectives of its educational efforts at helping machines learn what they already know, what they don't know, something profound is changing. So, what exactly is this AI personalized tutor, right? We kind of mentioned that it's the blending of, you could say, Facebook and ChatGPT, the algorithmic functioning of social media with the synthesizing of vast amounts of information that LLMs can do. So instead of large language models, the AI tutor is focused on creating what's called personalized language models, or PLMs, by leveraging sophisticated algorithms and machine learning techniques, an apparent marriage between TikTok and ChatGPT. The personal AI tutor allegedly has the ability to evaluate a particular student's strengths, weaknesses, and even their style of learning. Persistently optimized, personalized data on the student is gathered through real-time valuations of assessments, quizzes, and a host of other user interaction information, allowing the AI tutor to tailor a personalized learning path for each individual student. Over time, we're actually able to see how a student best learns, adapt to their strengths and their weaknesses. It will help us offer students a personalized education. This is from a promotional video that Microsoft released last year about one of the AI personalized tutors that they're they've released in a program together with the Ministry of Education in, I think it's the United Arab Emirates in the Middle East. And this promotional video goes on to affirm that generative AI is here, and that educational models must adapt to that technology in order to stay relevant. The video says education is ripe for disruption, and the AI personalized tutor is an instrument that will allow our children to stay relevant in a world dominated by technologies that are continuously changing the scale, pace, and pattern of our society. I wanted to show a brief video about this AI personalized tutor. Give me just a second to see if I can open it up here. Uh, and then I'll come back to my presentation. It's only a 1 minute thing, but it was an interesting video that, let's see here. I'm going to open up my regular screen to share this. Okay, here we go. Sorry. Okay, here it comes. I'm sorry, my internet's a little slow, but it's only a 1.5 minute video from Microsoft. Let me see if I can get it to open here real quick. Okay, I don't think it's going to work. Let me get out of this. I apologize. Basically, it's the video. I'll try and share it at the end if I can. The video is basically just talking about how Microsoft and their AI personal tutor have been implemented into different public schools in the United Arab Emirates, and they're talking about essentially what we've talked about how it's tailored. It's using the algorithmic functions of social media essentially to spy on students throughout their school day. There's they're constantly on screens. The screen is monitoring, all of what they're doing, learning how they're learning, looking at what's difficult for them, what's easier for them, and that allows the program to subsequently create a personalized program of how these students can then better learn. So that's kind of what that is. Sorry, let me reopen this real quick. Sorry, I shouldn't have closed it. Okay. Okay, so that's kind of what the AI personal tutor is in a nutshell. Like I said, I think that's one of it is one of the I guess you could say perhaps um, most disruptive technologies that's coming, and it is already being released in different ministries of education around the world. Why should we be concerned about this? What are some of the drawbacks? The promotional video that I was going to show by Microsoft, they lay out all of the positives. That this tutor is going to make learning much more efficient. It's going to be personally tailored to each individual child. Each individual child is going to drastically increase how much access to information they have. Teacher error is going to drastically reduce because all of a sudden you have the perfect knowledge that's available in the case of LLMs and almost instantaneous access to all of this information. What are some of the causes for concern? Why should we push back against that? Why should we not just simply embrace the AI personal tutor as this revolutionary technology that's really going to help us? This word that I've used in different classes called epistemicide. Epistemicide is the
education system in the UAE is growing and moving very fast to prepare the students for the future. We're thinking of how can we support students
Sorry about
out
this.
the school and help the students who don't have access to private tutors.
Now
So right after ChatGPT had come out, one of the things that the UAE really wanted to do was not just regulate like most countries in the world are doing, but really innovate. We're very excited by the AI tutor project, where it can make sure learning happens anywhere and everywhere, provided to students of the country for completely free.
المميزات إنه it's available 24 hours وأيضا إنه يختبر الطالب ويسأله أسئلة على حسب السؤال اللي هو سأله.
I had an Arabic text where I put it in the system to check whether I have missed any grammatical issues, and it didn't fix it for me. Instead, it guided me to the process.
We use both Azure OpenAI and Azure Machine.
Okay, I apologize about that. Can you all hear me still? I hope. Okay, let me go back and share my video, sorry, my presentation. I apologize. Give me just 2 minutes to try and reopen my presentation. It closed on me, I think. Anyways. Okay, I apologize. I think I'm back. I'm going to go ahead and reshare my presentation. I had to restart my computer here. Okay, so one of the reasons for concern that I mentioned was this word epistemicide, which is the articulation of a very explicit manner in which knowledge is destroyed. It was a term that was initially coined by a Portuguese sociologist by the name Boaventura Sousa Santos. He said in his famous book by the title Epistemicide, is that it is a systematic destruction of knowledge, often in the service of political strategies, where the intent is to overwrite local knowledge with the imported knowledge systems of the West. Obviously, the term epistemicide comes from the combination of epistemology and genocide. So it's not, the physical killing of the person, but the killing of the way of knowing of other peoples. Another indigenous scholar by the name of Linda Tuhiwai Smith, she says that by the 19th century, colonialism not only meant the imposition of Western authority over indigenous lands, indigenous modes of production, indigenous law and governments and resources, but the imposition of Western authority over all aspects of indigenous knowledges, languages, and cultures, right? So it's this idea that there was only one real way of knowing, one real way of living, and that any other knowledge system was going to be inferior, right? This kind of epistemicide, came to its most kind of dramatic model in the residential schools. So in many parts of the world, colonial authorities would forcefully take young indigenous children away from their families and force them into boarding schools, often run by churches, by Catholic churches, or by the state, and prohibit them from speaking their languages, from practicing their customs. The idea was to essentially civilize them or make them more European in their manners. This was a drastic form of epistemicide. And some people have made the claim that forcing AI and the AI personal tutor into classrooms is kind of an update of the residential school model of the 17th to 20th centuries. In what way? Let's see. I can't get it to turn. So how is that happening? I worked for the Ishil University, which was a small university in northern Guatemala that was specifically focused on trying to help indigenous people in the northern part of Guatemala rescue their traditional forms of knowledge, their traditional ways of understanding. And one of the reasons that people in the Ishil region were so focused on creating an autonomous university that focused on their own forms of knowledge was this idea that in schools, in universities, traditional knowledge simply wasn't talked about, right? And a lot of the elders in the community, a lot of people said one of the problems is that teachers, tell students to go do their homework, to go to the local cyber cafe, to go to their local computer, to use their smartphone, whatever it might be, and to simply ask Google what the answer is. So if the history homework was to talk about the foundation of the state of Guatemala, most students would go to the local cafe and they would type that into Google and basically copy and paste whatever it said. And what the elders were frustrated about in that sense is that that wasn't a way of necessarily sharing or discussing what they wanted to learn themselves, right? What they had to say. I remember we interviewed an elder in the community, and he said one of the biggest problems is that my knowledge isn't in Google. When young people go to talk about Google or to ask Google certain things, they're not going to be asking. My knowledge is not reflected there. In the same way, the large language models like ChatGPT, like Gemini, like all of these major programs today, none of them are trained on data or knowledge or wisdom that is outside the internet, right? None of them are being trained on traditional indigenous knowledge, in this case, the knowledge of these Shil people, right? Large language models, the programs used to train AI tutors, are not trained on the unwritten knowledge and wisdom of millions of indigenous and land-based peoples around the world. By enclosing knowledge to that which is only found on the internet, where large language models can be trained, is a fundamental expression of epistemicide. Because basically, when you give, like Microsoft and like the Salvadoran Ministry of Education saying that the best way to make education efficient and easy and convenient for young people is to put into their hands essentially a large language model slash TikTok machine that will give them answers. That's excluding any type of knowledge that cannot be found on ChatGPT, on large language models. All of the unwritten knowledge, the pre-literate knowledge, the land-based knowledge, right, of people who live outside the scope of ChatGPT, of the internet. And it's very colonial in nature to say that the only knowledge that exists is that which is, within the internet, that which is only found on ChatGPT. Another question for concern, I think, is the question over prompting, right? Obviously, education is a process of asking questions. That's correct. That's right. But to whom should we direct our questions? For many people, the idea of connecting education and curriculum to the process of teaching young children how to ask the right questions of AI programs and algorithms might on the surface seem like a surprisingly good fit. Is not the underlying ethos of education the process of teaching our children and our young people how to ask questions in search of the acquisition of information and knowledge? There are those who might argue, however, that real education, good education, proper education should be focused rather around the arduous work of accompanying a young person in the process of drawing out that desire for knowledge that is embryonic in every human mind. There is, quite obviously, a fundamental discord in the patterns of how the educational process of questioning and drawing out occurs, right? If drawing out simply means tricking ChatGPT into giving better information, that's much different than teaching a young person how to discover something for themselves. Yeah, I think it's very important to understand that difference, like I mentioned earlier. With the AI personal tutor and the science of super prompting, the primary focus of education will shift towards optimizing the data-driven process of prompting a machine to discover that which it knows but did not know it knew. Instead of engaging in the process of uncovering knowledge for oneself, the primary task of a diligent student will be know how to provoke, or maybe we could even say trick, a machine into discovering something novel. This new pathway towards information acquisition will, and I like the differentiation between the idea of learning in the idea of information acquisition, right? What is education for? Is it just about the process of acquiring information in the easiest and most efficient way possible? Or is it about learning, which is something entirely different? It's not just about getting the facts right, getting the numbers right, getting the data right. What is learning really about, right? The new pathway, the AI personal tutor model, however, is about freeing the student from having to endure the tiresome and muddlesome process of learning something through the efforts of their own mind and through their own questions directed to people of trust within their family and their community, right? Um, uh, in the coming educational era of super prompting, instead of asking questions of our parents, our grandparents, the elders in our community, our peers and our friends, our friendships, and of other people in our community, every potential piece of information and knowledge will be instantly and readily made available through a personalized technology that learns how you learn. Zach Stein is the author of this book called Education in the Time Between Worlds, Essays on the Future of Schools, Technology, and Society. And he warns against the drive to give ultimate teacherly authority to a machine and to endow that machine with hyperstimuli in the domains of persuasion, charisma, and intimacy. Everybody knows how addicting social media is, especially to young people. We see young people spending 12 hours a day on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, all of these programs. It's super addicting and it tends to draw out kind of the worst aspects of what we are of people. And what Zach Stein says is imagine replacing the teacher, the authority in the classroom with essentially, a fun, interactive Facebook that is a learning tool, right? What happens when that happens? When an AI personalized tutor is able to algorithmically understand the particular knowledge acquisition pathways of an individual child and also interact with that child in the most charismatic and alluring and enticing and addictive way possible, there's a very real danger of obsolescing a child's need for human educators and human interaction, right? I see young people in my community that don't need even to interact with their own friends. They prefer, to sit down on the corner and play Minecraft, or I forget all the names of these online games, right? It obsoleses the need for human interaction. And what Zach Stein argues in his book is that by imposing this AI personal tutor, it might make it easier for young people to access information, but it also fundamentally changes the interactions that happen in the classroom between friends, between peers, between student and teacher, etc. The personalized AI tutor, Stein believes, will become this shape-shifting surround sound in augmented reality, ever-present quasi-humanoid tutor which obsoletes human relationship. And then he asks, what will happen when an entire generation of young people is essentially raised and educated by a machine, and when all knowledge and access to infinite amounts of information comes from that machine? What happens when AI personalized tutors obsolete the traditional intergenerational transmission of knowledge, which was once the foundation of education? right? Another cause for concern that Nicholas Carr, a journalist that writes for the New York Times and has written several books about this, um, uh, is essentially that digital tools, digital technologies, phones, computers, tablets, etc., make us unable to concentrate, to think deeply, to ponder, to contemplate. Nicholas Carr argues in this book called The Shallows and in several others he's written recently that the internet and that digital tools in general make our brains shallower by promoting quick scanning, multitasking. This weakens our ability to concentrate, to deeply read, to contemplate. He explains that because our brains are neuroplastic, meaning that they can change how how the different neural connections happen. Constant exposure to the internet's ecosystem of interruption strengthens circuits for skimming and processing.
It seems we lost the presenter again. Let's wait for him. Let's wait a couple of minutes so the presenter can reconnect. He seems to be having connection issues.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
I apologize. The electricity went out. We're in the middle of the worst part of the rainy season here in El Salvador. Um, Let me try and share my screen here real quick. Give me just a second. Okay. So yeah, so Nicholas Carr, like I mentioned, is arguing that essentially that digital tools reshape how we think. And I think one of the questions we should be asking ourselves is how the use of the AI personalized tutor, where a student, essentially instead of having to formulate a question themselves, think about it, research, read a book, ask people in their question, in their community, go in to the forest and learn about how ecosystems work, all of these traditional tools of education. What happens when learning is simply about asking a question? I think that if we follow the work of Nicholas Carr and others, that's fundamentally making our brains shallower thinkers, right? Instead of engaging in this depth of process. And then lastly, I think that the AI personalized tutor puts us in a place of questioning what is technology for? What should it be for? Technology as an extension of human ability versus technology as a replacement for human ability. Marshall McLuhan, the famous kind of the inventor of media ecology and thinking about how technology shape us, he said that all media or technologies are extensions of some human faculty, psychic or physical. He also said that every extension of mankind, especially technological extensions, have the effect of amputating or modifying some human capability, right? And I want us to think about that difference between extension of and replacement of, right? In the case of agriculture, which is what I like to do, a hoe, to work the land, to farm, is obviously an extension of human muscle, our arms, our ability to work the land. Whereas, a massive robotic combine, where we don't even need anybody in the driver's seat driving the thing, tools that are programmed to grow food by themselves. That is an example of a technology that replaces human ability, the need for human beings to be on the land growing food. I think that the same difference we can see with computers and large language models. Learning to use a computer to research things on Wikipedia, to access different forms of knowledge that can be found on the internet, reading different opinions. That's a tool that helps us think. Whereas large language models is essentially a replacement for our ability to think, right? It's essentially give us a quick and easy and convenient answer. McLuhan also said in his famous book, Understanding Media, that with the arrival of electric technology, man extended or set outside himself a live model of the central nervous system itself. To the degree that this is so, it is a development that suggests a desperate and suicidal auto-amputation. Rapidly, he said, we approached the final phase of this extension of man, which was the technological simulation of consciousness, when the creative process of knowing is essentially given over to the machine. He was writing this back in the 1960s, so many people see McLuhan as kind of this prophetic figure, that this desire to amputate all of the things that we can do for ourselves, to amputate human autonomy and agency through dependency on tools and technologies, eventually was going to, the last kind of amputation that would happen would be the amputation of our brains. And lastly, I want to say, why is this happening, right? Why are so many people so enthralled with large language models, AI, all of the ease that our tools and technologies offer us? Ivan Illich says that an eminently suitable and complex artificial device or tool that is already available within a society will be turned into a tool for the performance of a task only at that historic moment when the task acquires symbolic significance. So I think it's important to think about what is the symbolic significance of today's society? What is kind of the ethos of modernity that has led us into such a widespread adoption of AI, of governments and tech companies and in the wider public embracing this tool? And I think that it is our addiction to ease, convenience, and frictionless lives is the historic symbolic ethos that has led us into this moment of auto-amputating our ability to think and to learn autonomously. And I apologize for going a little over time, but I just want to end real quick here with this is the conclusion to the chapter I was writing. It says, if we assume or hope, as the Salvadoran state seems to assume and hope, that our future lies entirely within the bounds of an AI-dominated world and of increasingly powerful algorithms determining the direction of every government policy and every human decision, then perhaps the best way to make education relevant to this forthcoming brave new world is to affirm to our children and young people that we are no longer capable of answering their questions, and that they would do better to seek out answers from a technology that is more proficient and efficient than we are at offering succinct, personalized, and laconically ordered answers that are methodically and instantly categorized from the billions of pages of data and bits of the internet. While we are at it, why not also hand over the cumbersome and messy tasks of counseling, parenting, and friendship as well? If, however, we still have doubts regarding the inevitability of this techno-future of education, if we still harbor concerns about its safety or its goodness for us or for our children, if we still maintain some hope that young people may be able to ask the proper questions of themselves, of their parents, of their peers, of their grandparents, of people in their community, and muddle through the difficult and sometimes contrasting answers that we give in search of knowledge relevant to the construction of their own lives and minds, then we should approach the medium of the AI personalized tutor apprehensively. This human process of acquiring knowledge through asking questions of oneself and to different members of the community is certainly messy, muddlesome, and more cluttered in its nature. If the ethos of technique is to constantly pursue efficiency, ease, and comfort in all facets of life, then teaching children to ask questions of people who might give them conflicting responses is certainly going against the grain of our technological society. The most subversive educational model today, then, is to encourage young people not to settle for simple answers, efficient solutions, and the convenience of ChatGPT homework assignments, but rather to accept bewilderment, to enter into constant consideration of the ambiguous and contradictory pieces of information that sometimes confuse the hell out of us, to seek out knowledge and wisdom from those sources deemed to be ignorant and unenlightened by the unrelenting march of progress, and even to tolerate certain levels of ignorance, of accepting the mystery and necessity of sometimes not knowing the answer.